Hey everyone, my name is Jacob. I am the founder and CEO of Metrosuite, and this is the Metrosuite podcast where I talk with experts who are helping solve one of the biggest challenges in housing today, the missing middle. We dig into what's working, what's not, and how we can make housing more attainable, practical, and built for how people actually live today. That being said, I am super excited to have Victoria Suen from BuildX Design on the show. Victoria, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me on. I think we need more podcasts like this to chat about everything people are experiencing right now and getting housing built.
Yeah, I think you might be one of the best people in the city of Toronto proper, and I would say to other municipalities around for all question zoning. Your understanding of the city and the processes, all of which we'll get into, what's happening with density, what's upcoming is almost bar none. So let's dive deep into all of that. I think the first thing I wanted to ask you a little bit, just on the personal side. So could you give our listeners a little bit about your story? Like, where did you start and how did you get to where you are now?
Sure, yeah. Depends on how far you want to peel back, but I'd say I've always been interested in real estate specifically. Like I didn't even know architecture was really a profession. I obviously did classes and stuff in art and whatnot, but I think just like early days, what inspired me was like TV shows, like looking at flipping houses and real estate and just like the whole renovation process. So with that and some ideas of like art and technology. I entered into an architecture program. I went to the University of Waterloo. I went through the whole process of becoming an architect, which is almost like a 10-year process, at least in Canada. Um, so all the while, I was still very interested in real estate and business, but not something that you're really educated about when it comes to university. So it's always like a thing of passion on the side. And then as I graduated and continued my path as in becoming an architect, I started investing in real estate personally. And then I think over time it's just like a bridge, like real estate investing and then architecture and becoming a licensed architect. So when I finally became a licensed architect, naturally I was helping people in the real estate investment space because that's what I was doing for myself. And then more and more investors were asking me to help them with their projects. And then now more recently with like new zoning updates and the push for housing, missing middle, housing densification, just the projects are getting, a little bit bigger and bigger and we've kind of done more and more projects specifically in Toronto. So, in a way it's something I stumbled upon, but in a way I was always passionate about all of these subjects and getting trained in that way. But now we're full architecture practice. We're based in Toronto. We have like a 5-person team. We do, I don't know, we've done like hundreds of these kind of missing middle
Wow.
projects now. So, yeah, definitely trying to be, a go-to expert in the space.
So when you finished architect school, and sorry, did you say it was in Toronto? Was it OCAD that you said?
No, like I teach at OCAD part-time, but I went to the University of Waterloo for both my bachelor's and my master's of architecture. Yeah.
And so when you finished that, you said you went to right into investing. Did you did you work at a practice before you did that? And what did that look like?
Yeah, so when I was in university, our program at the University of Waterloo has a lot of co-ops. So by the time I was done my undergrad, I'd probably maybe 2 years of experience working at a variety of different firms. I worked in Vancouver, I worked in New York, I worked at some Toronto firms, and I just used it as the opportunity to, try out different things, right? Different size offices, different types of projects. But I've worked on anything like high-end commercial, retail, residential, high rises, um, pretty much all different project types. And yeah, it's good experience overall. And then after graduating, and towards your path to licensure, you need, at the time at least, about like 3 years of experience working under an architect. So I worked at a couple different firms in Toronto, and I got my hours, wrote my exams, and then that's how I became licensed. Yeah.
So is that like an apprenticeship program? Like sort of
It
like an
kind of is.
electrician?
Yeah, in a way, like when you graduate out of your master's in architecture school and in Canada at least, um, you become an intern architect, which I guess people aren't a fan of because intern sounds like, you're like a student or something, but you have a master's degree and then in your internship, I'd say it's the equivalent like if you're a doctor and you're doing your residency, right? It's kind of like that. So that's when you're gaining your hours and your experience, and you're gaining that experience across different parts of the project. So anywhere from what's called like design to construction drawings to contract admin, being on site, doing the construction review and whatnot. So you have various categories of those hours, and all the while you're working under a licensed architect, so that you're deemed to have the credentials to eventually like stamp and do your own drawings.
And can you tell us, so that's really interesting, and I feel like that really helped. That gave you I would guess that gave you quite a holistic view of the real estate investing process itself. Like you have a really good idea of how to like say optimize the design for cost or for function. What was your experience and what is your experience? I don't know if you're still investing in that period when you were investing in properties and just getting started. What was your experience like?
Yeah, I would say it's funny actually. Like in theory, architects can be good in certain aspects, but like even out of school, I felt like I didn't have enough in the field on-site experience. There's what you learn in the textbook, and then there's the realities of the construction site. So coming out of school or even an internship, like and you getting your license, depending on how much involvement you have in construction on site, you could have a actually big gap in knowledge in terms of the realities of construction. So I would say being an architect, you have a very strong grasp of the design side of things and maybe getting a permit. Maybe even not, because I would say like within a firm, only a handful of people are actually the ones dealing directly with the city. Like I could be a drafts person and then not submitting to the building department, not going through that back and forth. So there's a lot of learnings in doing that, and you might not be the one doing that if you're in a larger firm, right? So there's a lot of potential gaps in knowledge, which I personally sought out for myself because I was always curious about like how everything worked, right? Like how do you acquire property? What does that look like? How much money does that take? And putting in that risk and then getting the permit, that part is something that I was comfortable with. But then like getting a contractor, going through construction, what are the issues in construction? All the while you're like funding this, so then you feel the risk and the pressure of all that. So I think in seeking that out and investing in real estate, I feel like better empathize with my clients that are in a similar position, but also like there's a lot of again the realities of the actual construction and process that architects don't have full sight on. So they might not even understand that that's happening.
And so on that last item, what do you mean by that? Is that like site-based items might differ than the drawings, for example? Is that what you mean by that?
There's just a lot of like architecture, as much as I wouldn't like to admit, is like a part of the process. Like there's a lot that happens outside of the architect. Like even site coordination, right? Dealing with utilities. How is this like a lot of what say the general contractor does or like a development manager overseeing everything does is outside the scope of an architect. Like even thinking about like the site, like let's say you're demolishing a site, getting the reports ready so it's demolished, getting all the legal stuff, dealing with utilities, dealing with like call before you dig, and like all these little things. Like architect's not involved. There's like here's your drawing, here's your permit, and then we can help you into construction through contract admin. But like there's a lot going on to make that project happen outside the scope of the architect too.
Can you give us an example, and then I'd like to move on to the cool things that you guys are doing at BuildX. Can you give us an example of like an investment that you made during that period, and just like walk us through what ended up happening with it?
Sure, yeah. So, purchased a property in Niagara, and then just like a simple project. I guess the idea was, I'd like to build a portfolio, so bought a single family home, put a basement unit in, so legalized a secondary suite in that, and then looked up the zoning, saw that has potential for a garage to be converted into a third unit. By the time it's like, oh, that wasn't even necessary for it to cash flow. So
Hmm.
we just kind of kept it simple, did like a legal suite. After doing all the renovations, the value was higher, so then we got it refinanced, and then pulled out some equity and then put that into the next project. So like my investing was simple stuff like that, that just allowed me to like create a portfolio of real estate of like smaller multiplexes, um, which is kind of like what I guess a lot of the stuff we're helping with our clients on in Toronto, but probably kicked up a notch with like more and more units.
Yeah, it's interesting how you're like I've seen this happen, especially with other guests that are on the podcast, where you have like this experience that's building on top of each other, and looking forward it doesn't really make sense, but then looking backwards it's like, oh wow, like this, all these dots sort of connected, like you going to school, getting that base foundation, and then doing one yourself, and then jumping into like helping others. Like I feel like you just have so much more like knowledge and experience, and like, you know, awareness to sort of like be where you are right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even like for me, it never felt linear. Even though like as I tell my story, it probably sounds very linear. Like I went to school for architecture and then became a licensed architect and then I was investing in real estate and then started my own practice helping people invest in real estate and do these things. So, but all the time, like for me, it felt like very much like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Do I want to stay? And then like it didn't feel very linear. And then to your point, yeah, like all the experience I had, and it's kind of leading to this without me even like fully understanding the entire like roadmap. But I will point out like the one thing I always found interesting was like as I was becoming an architect and doing all these projects, like my experience was actually on a very large scale. Like for the most part, I was working on like apartments and condos and like much bigger projects. But by no
Hmm.
means as an investor, I can kind of start that way. So then on the design architecture side, I was like working on the large scale. And then on the investment side, I was working on like the smallest scale, like houses or duplexes. And then slowly I feel like I'm bridging that gap between the
Hmm.
two worlds. So that part is kind of interesting that like again, like the two worlds are finally like truly colliding.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's very interesting. And it's very timely too. Like it, just all a whole bunch of stuff that we'll get into has happened in the past 3 years in Toronto, and your experience is definitely relevant. So building on that, you talked a little bit about BuildX and what you guys are doing over there. Could you give maybe a bit more of an understanding of what sort of projects you help with and what services are available? And then I want to get into what your role is there as a business owner.
Yeah, sure. So for the most part, we're helping with like multiplexes, middle density housing, infill development, um, and specifically in Toronto, though we've helped people kind of all across Ontario. But yeah, like anything from like duplex, triplex, fourplex, now sixplex, conversions, additions, new builds, so as well as like garden suites and laneway suites. So we're doing a lot of those projects, and then we have some commercial projects that we've done as well. I think hoping to do a little bit more of that. We have this one industrial project, a couple industrial that we have on the go as well. So we don't talk about those as much because I think our niche is into like the multiplex missing middle space. So I'd say for the most part, we're primarily in that niche.
So, do you, okay, so what sort of client would come to you? Is it an investor or is it family member that's looking to knock down their house? Like, yeah, who's coming to build X?
Most of them are investors. A lot of I'm seeing a mix though, which is interesting. Like before it was more like a mom and pop investor, right? Like more of an individual trying to like maybe build a real estate portfolio and their goal is like, something to have a bit of more of a nest egg or like financial freedom and that kind of thing. But I think I'm seeing within the past year or two more frequently is um, more like institutional investors, whether it's like individuals that are pulling together capital, or even like they have a fund, like a small fund, or even like much larger players that would typically be doing um, subdivisions or apartments. They're at least exploring the space of this missing middle. So I'm actually seeing all types of like investor developers. So it's in that way, it's a very interesting time. But for the most part, investor developers. On occasion, we have individual homeowners, but they're treating it almost like an investor would, where um, they're looking to do multiple units and increase the value. I guess the one point that's maybe a little bit different sometimes we see from individual homeowners is like, oh, it's a multiplex I want, but it's because I want my kid to say have a place to live in Toronto, let's say, because they see that that window is maybe closing, and if they don't set this up for their children, maybe their children won't have the opportunity or ability to buy in the city anymore.
So is it mostly rental then, based off what you just said, or are people like condominiumizing these sorts of units?
Yeah, it's still mostly rental. We have explored the condo minimizing of these properties, but I think it's a little early to do that. It's always about like cost versus the benefit at the end. And I think as we get into, 6, 8, 10 units, that kind of scale, that's when I think this will be more entertained. And also when like the market matures. But for now, we haven't been condominiumizing our projects for our
Hmm.
clients. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Another question I wanted to ask you as a fellow business owner, you had mentioned that you now have five colleagues that you're working with, which is amazing.
Mhm.
What's it like, I guess, in your mind, like graduating from a practitioner, which I know that you still are, but
Mhm.
so, from a practitioner to like working on your business, like versus in
Mhm.
your business? How have you sort of made that shift?
Yeah, it's definitely less comfortable. Like I'd say I'm definitely like I read the E-Myth, right? Like and there's like three types of people I think it was saying. Anyways, I forget the exact, but like I'm a technician, definitely. And I think even when I was in the field, like I never understood like what is the value other people bring in like sales and all these other things. And like I was very very much a technician myself and then valued like the work that technicians do. And then as you become a business owner, you begin to learn like there's all these other skills like sales, marketing, and like building out systems and like that kind of thing that you're like, oh, okay, I'm understanding, other skills and value that is even more important to the sustainability of a business. So all of that to say is it's a learning process, but I love it. I love being in an environment that is constantly changing and figuring it out because I feel like that's actually where I'm, at my best. So I welcome that chaos sometimes. But yeah, it's something that is definitely a process.
So are you still working? Are you like how much of your time is working in your business versus on your business?
It's probably too much in the business than on the business, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'd have to do a time on it, to be honest. As I've been reading
I don't mean to pin
Buy
you
Back
to
Your
this
Time.
question.
Yeah, yeah. But no, it's a good question. I've been behind me is Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time and doing like a time audit and seeing like, oh, what do you need to like, delegate and whatnot. I don't know. I'd say it's maybe like 50-50 right now. Um, but I think we've kind of seen a lot of growth even in the past 6 months, 6 to 12 months even. So like things are constantly like evolving. And I think for us is I know the thing that I want to be mindful of is like bringing the same quality and attentiveness that we've been giving to all the clients that have been working with us so far and like maintaining that. So we don't want to grow too fast and lose that because I think there's a certain level of trust that people have in us and we want to maintain that. So I don't know, like I think right now, I guess to answer your question again, it's 50-50, but may need to shift that a bit more so we have more like systems so that we can maintain that level of quality and service that we want to bring to everybody.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because from from Metrosuite's perspective, working with you guys on several projects, you know, like it, I enjoy working with Victoria.
Hmm.
I'm starting to learn now because you've grown even just since we've over the past year with new projects with us, and
Hmm.
now you've brought in like other architects that are engaging with our firm. But you know, I guess it's just interesting to see how you'll manage the shift from like people wanting to work with Victoria versus people
Hmm.
wanting to work with BuildX. Like I feel like it's very different and successfully, in my opinion, successfully making that jump to like Victoria from Victoria to BuildX is
Hmm.
extremely important because one is like personal brand and another is a company brand, and one can scale to a certain extent and another can scale to another extent, much larger in my opinion. So
Agreed, yeah.
yeah.
I think like to that point, it's true. Like there will be a certain level. Let's say we do grow to that point where it's like, yeah, like I cannot be face to face on every single project, and just being like honest with those clients, being like, hey, like I'm not going to be on your project. Like you sign on, but you're going to be working with my team, or providing that option of like there's maybe a different level of service, let's say, is like you want Victoria on this project specifically, or, we'll have just our project team. And, depending on how, like maybe that's a conversation that needs to be had. But for the most part, like we're involved with, or I'm involved with like all the projects, at least some
Hmm.
sort of like high level visibility. But it's true, like at a certain point, maybe that won't be possible, and it's just about communicating that, but still like having the same level of quality and service that would be there whether I'm in it or not.
Because you also like I think to your point, you don't want to like lose that special hand on the pulse with like the customer, right?
Hmm.
Like you still want to know like what's going on because you personally as like the founder want to make sure that you're getting that quality level that you hope to to service clients. So it's a very tough thing. Um,
Hmm.
it's very tough. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that we were just talking about before the episode is what is happening in the city. And I
Hmm.
know that you have connections in the city, outside of the city. You have a very good understanding of what has been passed and what might be coming. Could you speak to both of these things and just give our listeners an understanding of like what is going on density wise?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess when we talk about the city, we're talking about Toronto, just so
Yes,
people know.
Toronto, yes. Yeah,
I
thank
know,
you.
like I feel like Toronto sometimes get hate being like the center of the universe. And anyways, I just want to we're talking about Toronto, though there's changes happening across Canada and Ontario I can speak to specifically, but like on a high level, like a bunch of the recent changes in the past year or two, I feel like we're kind of positioned because of the federal accelerator grant, right? So the federal government, was incentivizing cities to upzone to at least fourplexes for the most part. So we've seen that in many cities like, Peterborough that we're kind of working on, Jacob, and then Kitchener, Ottawa, Hamilton, and some parts of their cities. So a lot of different cities across Ontario are doing the fourplexes, right? But I'd say City of Toronto is kind of leading the charge. As of 2023, they've allowed for the fourplexes as of right, and then like it seems like every year at least there's like a new change. So in the summer, they allowed for sixplexes in the core of Toronto. So I believe it's 9 wards, and then East York, and then Ward 23, which is Scarborough North. So basically, like, I guess Old Toronto or like core Toronto, and East End, and then 1 ward in Scarborough. So that's huge, right? Sixplexes plus a garden suite or laneway suite. So potentially a 6+1 if you're like downtown Toronto, and then everywhere else you can still do a 4+1. Um, and
Right
then,
now, like you can go
yeah, right
right for a
now.
permit.
Yeah, as of right. Yeah, you don't need a rezone or anything. So
And
that
so,
opportunity is huge.
sorry, could you explain what as of right means?
Sure, yeah. As of right means like, so typically zoning is essentially the rules for which your land can be, the rules for how you can build, right? Like, are you zoned residential or institution or industrial or commercial, right? So if you want to build commercial in a residential zone, you'll actually have to do a zone change or a rezoning process, right? Same thing goes with like density in terms of like how many units can you build. So for the most part, prior to 2023, Toronto was like a single family neighborhood, like on the outskirts, and then the core of Toronto, you'd have like high rises. So the phenomenon of like the missing middle is that like we only have the two ends. We only have high rises or single family homes. There's nothing in between. For the most part, right? And that's how zoning and the rules for building on your land was situated. So these rules were, people would say, like broken because it didn't encourage other types of housing and development, and then as a result, the people involved would be because less kind of knowledgeable in these areas too, right?
Hmm.
So with the the upzoning of the land to allow for fourplexes and the garden suite, so 4+1, it allows anyone to build that without going through that zone rezoning process. So before you would need to like go to the city, ask for permission, have a whole application process, hire an architect, hire a planner, all this stuff. You can imagine it could get really expensive. Now
Hmm.
you cut all of that out, right? You don't need to go through that. You're allowed to do it. Then it's just a matter of forming a design, making sure that it meets Ontario Building Code, and then submitting that to the city for a building permit. Um,
Hmm.
so it cuts out a lot of the process that would have slowed someone down or even given neighborhoods the opportunity to shut it down and say, hey, we don't want this kind of development here. So yeah, it's a good thing to have to again like encourage housing densification and more housing in areas that in the past only allowed for a single family home.
So right now, you said that that anywhere in the city of Toronto you can build a fourplex plus garden suite, assuming that the property allows for it within like the zoning parameters. And then, is that
Correct.
correct? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Then you also said that the city recently passed, I believe it was last month,
Mhm.
in some wards in the city, you can build a sixplex in the main building and then a garden suite in the back, as of right. Is that also correct?
Yeah, exactly. It was in the summer that it was passed actually, and
Okay.
then and we can get into like a month ago, major streets allowed was like kind of finalized. That it was going through an appeal process that's allowing for even more development. But let me just check in terms of specifics. Yeah, there's like nine wards that it's being allowed in for the sixplexes.
Hmm.
And you can have again the plus laneway or garden suite, subject to your property being able to fit all of that. Yeah.
Right, for sure. And so what do you believe is the likelihood that the city passes the sixplexes citywide? And why I bring this up is because, from my understanding, there was some funding that the federal government had given Toronto under certain conditions. And
Yeah.
by not passing the sixplexes, and please correct me if I'm wrong, by not passing the sixplexes citywide, this put this deal or this funding in jeopardy. Do can you comment on that? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that was like a big kind of discussion around like for reference, when this was going under discussion, the sixplexes across the board being approved as of right for the city of Toronto, um, that's initially how it's coming to vote. And then when it's coming to vote, there's a lot of opposition, especially from suburbs, that, this is not something that counselors and people they've been hearing from in the neighborhood want to encourage. So then it was kind of scoped down so that it's like, instead of all of Toronto, let's allow for sixplexes within like Toronto, like downtown Toronto essentially, and then East York and Scarborough, and then everyone can choose to opt in. Like other wards and like neighborhoods can choose to opt in or not. So, um, yeah, that definitely came up to discussion in terms of like, does this put the federal accelerator money that the federal government is offering to the city up for discussion because they haven't sufficiently like encouraged enough housing development. I think it's yet to be seen, and it's still maybe a discussion. But from what I'm hearing from the city directly is that like that's not something that they're necessarily trying to push in terms of like sixplexes across the city. It's more transit-oriented development that they're trying to encourage, and maybe the hope is that that can fill in the gaps. It's like, okay, if sixplexes aren't encouraged across the board, even like suburbs and whatnot, can we still encourage missing middle development along transit corridors? And then that might be a more kind of sustainable, let's say, way of like adding those additional housing units. And to that, I'd say it's not wrong to kind of think that way. If anything, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, I think the major streets and like allowing further densification along transit-oriented areas may make more sense than like a sixplex in Etobicoke where realistically everyone's driving, and then can you fit all that parking in there? And so does that like change the makeup of the city? So I think, anyways, that's the direction I hear the cities looking to go in. But that being said, we're going into an election year, right? So next
Hmm.
fall will be when there'll be an election for the mayor of Toronto. So I think that's when people pull out all the stops to um, kind of show that they're kind of listening to their constituents.
Hmm.
And that could be better for worse, to be honest, when it comes to development, because there's a lot of places in the suburbs that don't want too much densification. It will change up the makeup of their neighborhood a little bit too much, in their opinion. So I think it could go either way. But all of that to say is like I think changes will be afoot and discussed going into an election year.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting, and I wonder because an election year is coming, whether all that is put on pause, like you said, or if it's accelerated. But based off what you just said, it appears that it could be put on pause just based off, not making a lot of people upset about like a blanket wide zoning. So we'll have to see.
Hmm.
So that's really really interesting. There's so much going on in Toronto proper, and it does, like you said, it does proliferate to other cities, and we've seen that with garden suites and whatnot.
Hmm.
So I think I wanted to just move into like sort of the individual property itself and seeing, how with all these different words like garden suites and fourplexes and sixplexes, how does like an investor with a property verify what they can build? Like I know that you've been working on some an interesting side project. Maybe you want to touch on that, but
Hmm.
could you just maybe talk a little bit about how people can review what they can build on their property?
Sure, yeah. Like for the high level part, it's like getting familiar with the zoning bylaw. Like all of that information is available online. So understanding, like Um, First, like what kind of project is it? Is it a conversion, right? So you're only doing interior renos. Are you trying to add on to the existing building, or are you trying to do a new build? So like high level, I think those are like three different project types and different ways to analyze, right? If it's an interior conversion, then you're not looking as much into the zoning per se and more about like how can I split it and like making sure that it meets building code and can be done at a high level before, say, checking with your architect. Additions and like new builds, that's when you're like looking more about like, okay, what are the rules with the land that I can do? What's the maximum building height, setbacks? How many like units and can I fit in here and whatnot? Um, so yeah, like I think outside of working with like an architect or designer that's very familiar in the space, it'd just be like educating yourself about these rules. And we're trying to build some tools there, whether it's like some modules so you can like learn about it. Um, or as you mentioned, Jacob, like we're building a tool where you can like type in address and then see if like you can build an ADU on it. Beyond that, we're looking at the tool extending into multiplexes. So then again, you can like type in the address and see like, okay, how much of a footprint can I build? And, is it a fourplex or a sixplex and whatnot? So that's the part that's, I guess, tough, right? Like outside of educating yourself, working with an architect that can tell you, or seeing if there's some fun new tools that can enable that knowledge. It's a steep learning curve, if I'm being honest. But if you're committed to getting into the space and being in development, um, then I think that's kind of the key things, right? Like educating yourself, building a power team that can help you, and then getting into a project for the first one at least, and then kind of building your knowledge over time.
I wonder if I wonder if what you said, sorry, I wonder if people will be able soon to review their properties uh, with a more streamlined approach. You had mentioned that and we're aware of this really interesting side project that you're working on where you have people enter their address and into a software and it tells them what they can build. Like, I wonder if that's the future where a lot of this stuff can be like the information is more readily available versus like previously having to go and nothing to take away from a potential business line, but from people having to go to like an architect and like, get like a full report and stuff like that. What you're working on is neat. And I would say, on a personal level, we're using it to qualify certain leads that come in. Like, what would that look like what does that look like with the garden suites and with the multiplex tracker or verifying it through the software?
Yeah, so like I think it is the way it's going, and I don't mind. I don't feel like it's actually taking away from our work as the architect. To be
Maybe it's
honest, like
expanding it. Maybe it's
yeah,
expanding.
yeah, it really is because I guess where the idea came from was like I was getting calls like nonstop of like, can I do this? Can I do that? And I'm like, okay, I know the rules of the building code. I'm not a software developer, but these are essentially all rules, like zoning rules, building code rules. It's all math, Like, can
Hmm.
we just automate the math and the geometry out of this? So, and a lot of these initial questions, it shouldn't be charging people an arm and a leg to just get some initial answers, right? So I agree. It like unlocks actually people to think about it on an early stage, and it's work that maybe you don't even need an architect yet. So I think it's totally fine to have these tools available. So I guess to break down the tools, like you type in the address, it finds the data of like what's the building, what's the property line, and then we analyze, okay, based on your setbacks and the land available, can you build a garden suite or laneway suite? And then how big is that build? And it's checking for, again, area, setbacks, your route to the fire, to the street for firefighting, and
Right.
those kind of things. And for now, it's just ADUs, but the same principles would apply for a multiplex. It's just the rules are slightly different, right? So the same way we're processing that data that's coming in could be applied. Again, it's just a different rule set.
And what's it called?
Oh, it's called Build Next. We haven't officially launched it to public or anything, but it is on a tool on your website, Metrosuite. So if anybody's curious about that, they should go to, is it metrosuite.com?
It is, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we have an API that goes into Metrosuite, so you can check out the tool there. But
We're the guinea
again,
pig.
you're the guinea pig. Yeah, I appreciate that you being the guinea pig. But I really think this is the way it's going, and I think it comes with the belief that like architects, planners, and whatnot provide these analysis or feasibility studies and analysis for big time developers because they have the funds and they can power like a team like that. But people in the missing middle space need the same tools and analysis, but maybe not at the cost of hiring a whole team of architects, right? Like,
Right.
so can we bring down the cost? And it's maybe not even as sophisticated as these bigger developments, anyways. So, is there a missing middle software tool that can cater to this new, I guess, generation of real estate developers in this space?
Yeah, it's really interesting how technology is lowering the cost to information. I think
Mhm.
along that vein, one of the things that I've asked you about before is how, if at all, are you using AI, artificial intelligence, internally in the company, in the firm? Like, how are you using it, and if yes, what does that look like at the moment?
Yeah, we've tested it, or I've tested it with a variety of different things, just to see how it's going, like whether it's for visuals and graphics, or um, what else? Code checks
Hmm.
and like different zoning things. I would say it's not perfect enough that I'd put my stamp and license kind
Hmm.
of to in
On it
jeopardy
yet?
for that, right? On that, yeah. It's like, in my opinion, like 95% correct, or I don't know if to put a number on, but it's not correct enough, right? Like I've kind of had people ask me a code question and then put it into ChatGPT and I'm like, oh, let's just high level see what thinks. I'm like, okay, that's wrong, and then I'll do like,
Hmm.
or I'll go to the actual code and be like, yeah, that's not right. So we've definitely tested different opportunities for AI. We haven't really integrated AI into our workflow or process quite yet, but I'm actively looking at tools to use so that it can be more integrated. But I think the first opportunity will be visuals, graphics, and providing some sort of additional, whether it's like options or capabilities, so that that iterative design process could be faster.
And do you see then at some point in the future like drawings basically being completed with prompts? I know that you, like a human, would need to review it, probably you personally, given that you're putting your stamp on it, but
Hmm.
could you see that happening? Like
Yeah,
where AI just creates like the drawings basically?
yeah, for sure. Like I've even done research within that space. So on this, I don't know if I mentioned, but like I'm a professor too, so we've conducted some research into AI architecture design, and then we were kind of looking at extracting data from drawings and then analyzing them for building code analysis. And then actually one of the questions that came out of that is like, where do we even get these floor plans? So then we're like, oh, should we be like generating floor plans and then analyzing them, right? And
Hmm.
based on our research, a lot of it actually stemmed from gaming, right? And so for sure, I think it is possible. And I don't know, I guess whether it will be um, something that will be super active. It will be dependent on like demand and like people wanting to go into the space. But if you ever played like an RPG video game, like like you generate a space or a room, and then like depending on like the map is black, right? And then as you kind of go about, the map begins to generate, and then and every time is a little bit different. So in a way, floor plans can be generated like a video game. So the key is instead of a video game, like it could be whatever, like there's a lot of like specific rules in Ontario Building Code. But if you think about video games too, like there are rules generated in terms of like how the rooms can be generated. It's like, oh, it needs a door and it needs to like enter from this space into that space. So there's already some embedded rules in engines. So I find that interesting because I think architecture and gaming will begin to merge worlds a little bit too.
Am I speaking to a gamer?
Yeah, I know you have the gaming headset. I do like a good video game. I haven't been playing much as of late. I like growing up. I loved RPGs and a lot of like the like world maps, like videos, like video games where you could explore and be a character and stuff like that. Um, but these days, yeah, if anybody knows, a bit of a nerd, but like I play League of Legends, so that's one game I still kind of play a little bit.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's a I think that requires a lot of strategy from what I remember reading about it.
it's an esports game. I play like a version of that, so it's not as intense, let's say. I would say yeah, it really plays more like a sport in a way,
Hmm.
because you have a team of five, and then you're like coordinating, and it's very fast paced. So like the top uh, esports gamers are like 20 and whatnot, and they retire before like physical sports players, which is funny. But anyways, that's like a side
Wow.
tangent. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's super interesting. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much, Victoria, for your time for coming on. I did not know that you were a professor at OCAD, I think you said at the beginning.
Yeah, professor at OCAD, and I also teach Conestoga. So I teach
Oh,
like their
wow.
building code and technical courses. So um, yeah, the fun architecture courses, I guess.
You leave the boring ones to others.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And just as a final question, how can people find more information about BuildX and get in touch with you?
Sure, yeah. Easiest way would be either on Instagram, our handle's at BuildXLab, or website is buildxdesign.ca, and then there's a form, so you can fill out the form and then reach out to us. But yeah, those would be the two best ways.
Okay. Thanks so much, and we'll chat again soon.
All right, yeah. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.